Hello, everyone. Let me see if I can get my Fathom to start. There we go. I'm still figuring out how this program works within Zoom. It doesn't seem to interact the same with the two different accounts that I have to use for work and for here. And so I think that's because I must be signed in my Zoom account only for the place where I work. So I'm not sure. It's definitely something I have not been able to figure out. And it's saying I need a passcode, which shouldn't require a passcode. So again, kind of strange. I'll have to figure that out. Let's head into Let's Go Help 2. I feel like I'm always having to learn something new just to keep doing the things that I've been doing a lot of times. Do any of you guys feel like that? Have any of you struggled with the internet or any of the programs that you utilize on the internet in the last few days? I know several of the people that I've talked to have been having some problems. I hope you're all doing good. Looks like it. Let's see if Benny had anything to say in the chat there. I just don't like all these things that they are doing on Zoom. It makes it so much harder. Well, hopefully you don't have any, Benny. He says, not yet. Tammy's had problems. I've had problems, and it seems like someone else had problems recently, but hopefully it gets a little bit better. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday weekend, and we definitely got a lot done in moving forward with the backyard, but it's still that same old song and dance, moving dirt, right? Keeping up with the growth that has happened where the soil life has begun its process, very small areas of the deliberately planted seeds that have come forth, but most of the dead soil in the backyard has now been filled in with less than desirable weeds, especially the foxtails. I am able to get rid of most of the undesirable weeds and have them just kind of disappear in a season or two. Foxtails are a different situation, so it is a struggle to keep them from continuing to be a problem throughout the garden. Also, bindweed in this area is really prolific. I debated with myself whether to pull each area out as I saw it come in. However, it is a good, if undesirable, ground cover, and with this ground being so hard packed and so dry that even with putting down the mulch, the weeds that come up are breaking up that compaction that's in the soil while helping the natural fungi that exist in soil and all these different soil nutrients that interact together. It's bringing that life back in. So it's a give and take. It'll take probably at least two, maybe as many as 3 seasons to shift that growth pattern around without using chemical intervention or bringing in a ton of resources from another site. So I'm a little bit frustrated only because I am not sure if I made the right choice with the bindweed. I've taken it off most of the plants that we were able to get to seed and turn into full plants, right? So many of them germinated and came up as seedlings and then died out just all over the yard. There's 2 patches that have some really good showings, the whole sunken garden and the easternmost side of the main berm. Otherwise, it's all weeds. Most of those weeds really are better weeds than the foxtails, but they're probably close to a third of the ground that's covered with weeds rather than the plants that we were working towards. We are having some successes though, and that is a success. So it's one that I okay, so the last soil that I brought back to life, I was able to get it back to life and eradicate all the noxious weeds. There were no foxtails there. There was hemlock. There were some of the buttercup burrs. There were some of what I grew up calling goat heads, the little 5-petal flowers that produce those nasty thorns with the big long thorn. The more prickly side of the false dandelions. All of these were relatively easily eradicated out of the last patch of soil that I brought back to life with the help of my family, of course. Um, it's a big effort, right? So there was more than just my effort involved. It took all of us to achieve the successes that we had there and that we're having here. We also were able to bring the kids more into it this time when we started moving the dirt this weekend, because we're putting it in just to fill up that ground to meet our concrete pad there. And so it doesn't have the same level of skill needed. While I've been working on these berms and reshaping the berms that were already there, it really had a very specific purpose to moving the dirt. And I didn't feel like they were going to be able to keep it within the guidelines of what was wanted with those areas. They needed some more practice with moving dirt in general before they would be able to help with that. And so now we can all get in there and really get to it and start putting in some work, always trying to manage that time. All of us, right? We're so busy in this day and age, the paycheck job, working here and collectively rewilding, working on the garden, maintaining self, maintaining house, all of these types of things keep it so busy. Our new attempt at a schedule with working on moving that dirt is going to be each of us spending half an hour a day out there moving dirt. I do think that it is more reasonable, and also I think it will be a tremendous success moving forward. We already saw quite a bit over this weekend, and we've got, a good probably 8 to 12 feet halfway done towards that corner there. I love how much more we have to do, since we do have so much dirt to move everywhere that we can legitimately utilize that dirt that was dug up primarily for the Wally Peony. That partially submerged greenhouse is very, very helpful. I don't really think we're going to have a difficult time utilizing almost all of it. We might have just the slightest amount left. We're going to use it for the raised beds in the front yard. I looked it up here in Tooele County, Utah. There are no laws prohibiting raised beds in the front yard. You want to definitely check with your municipality when you're going to do something less yard-like in your front yard. Things like corn, squash, tomatoes, they can even get you in trouble, get you fined by the city. I don't agree with that. You may want to work towards a resolution or a compromise with your city. I wouldn't start by putting in a whole lot of money and effort to begin the battle. I would want to politely start going to different meetings, maybe reaching out to different members like your city planner or your city council, things like that, to begin a discussion, a polite, friendly, hopeful, positive oriented discussion about allowing some gardening in the front yard. So since there are no laws that are geared towards controlling gardening in the front yard, the only somewhat close restriction is that they don't want anything over 3 feet, right? A lot of front yards are not allowed to have like your 6-foot fence. You can have a 3 to a 4-foot fence generally in most front yards. That is 3 feet here, not a problem. We were only going to go up about 3 tiers. So we have the ground level raised bed, and then we'll come in probably about 2 feet and put the second tier of raised bed, and then have it being big enough where we can come in another 2 feet to put out probably just maybe 2 to 3 feet wide at the topmost tier. And in those, they'll not only have the Hugel Cool Tour or water batteries, they will also have more ornamental types of gardening plants. I wouldn't put up tomatoes or something like that for sure, unless it were more towards some of those vining tomatoes can be quite attractive. And if you put it towards the back, it might not draw as much attention. You might even want to start out by putting something like that into a container to see if there are any complaints made about having that type of a plant in your front yard, so that if somebody says, nope, that's too much like a garden, you got to get it out of here, you could simply take your bucket and move it back into your backyard or onto your patio or whatever the case may be, right? So we'll keep it to 3 feet. and we'll keep more ornamental plants, and we won't put tall plants on that topmost tier. So lots of pretty herbs and some of the medicinal herbs are very, very beautiful. So things along those lines, as well as raspberry bushes and blueberry bushes up towards the front. All of these things will be more towards the attractive set. We'll specifically buy cultivars of raspberry and blueberry that are more attractive in their nature, right? And so doing all of these things to hopefully avoid any conflict with the city. We're also out here right at the very end. As I've mentioned before, there are 2 houses more on our side of the street, and then there's nothing. It isn't natural anymore. It's been degraded just by human interaction, but there are no buildings, there are no fences. It's just open land for miles and miles and miles until the Army base at the next mountain range over. I would guess at least probably 30 miles, 40 miles away. That's all just open land. So they're going to probably be a little more open to something that's here, a little less worried about it. If it were on the main street where it is an older style town, right? It's just now really burgeoning and gaining a ton of new citizenry, new houses. They've put up condos. There's plans for more, including in this wide open space right next door here. All of these things are shifting and changing. So more and more restrictions will likely come. That's where, again, I want to work within all close laws or regulations, keeping it to that 3 feet, keeping shorter plants on that top tier, and keeping, especially on the front half of both of the planned raised beds for the front yard, keeping the front half very much towards that ornamental set. Marigolds, foxgloves, thyme and rosemary, some just really beautiful, with even something just basic like alyssum or clover that we're going to put into the yard itself. It's just devastated, as I've talked to you guys a little bit about before. They watered it until there was just almost no nutrients in the front yard. And so we have many plans that we are already implementing and that we will continue to implement as we go along. We've pretty well decided we're going to wait to put the compost down until the spring. We're just so busy with so many different things. Hopefully we'll be working on the Wally Peony, that submerged greenhouse, for those of you who may be joining us and haven't heard some of our discussions previously. We're going to be hopefully working on the actual structure within that hole that's been dug into our backyard. My father is the one that came up and dug it for us. And he actually said that he felt really bad leaving us with what he had done to our backyard. He just thought he destroyed our backyard. And I understood what his view of what he had done, how it felt to him. And it did feel a little bit like that. However, if he were to come, hopefully before the winter, when there's still a little bit of green, I think he'll begin to see that what I've done is going to really make for a wonderful yard, while yes, leaving with us just a tremendous amount of work to accomplish, right? So we have all of these tons of dirt in the backyard. For those of you, again, who haven't heard these discussions already, and if we haven't gotten the majority of it moved by the spring, we're hoping to be able to invest into the smallest mini excavator that we could possibly get our hands on. Hopefully something that has interchangeable pieces, not just to excavate, but maybe to move snow or I don't know, goodness, I'm not a tractor person. I really don't like machinery to a large degree. However, there is need for it, right? Within our environmentalism, within working towards sustainability, within our trying to create changes in our lives that could have a ripple effect for the world and for the ecosystems that we're all a part of. We have to understand that we don't have the same amount of time that someone in the past might have. Whether you want to go back to tribal, you want to go back 150 years, it really doesn't matter. We are so busy in our day-to-day lives fulfilling that paycheck obligation, taking the time to pay the bills, not having our food right outside of our home or outside of our structure, you know, whatever level, again, of humanity that you want to go back to. So we have to work when we're able to on these goals. And many times we're not going to be able to do the same things by hand that would have been feasible time-wise in a previous generation. So mechanization is an unfortunate reality that needs to be accepted in most situations when you're doing a tremendous amount of work within soil even, right? Obviously, we don't want to build a house without a drill, without a power screwdriver, without nails, right? We don't want to have to carve each nail out of wood to tap in to our roofs to hold them together. We don't want to have to rebuild our roof with hay every year. So there are things that we aren't wanting to return to. And that's where we try to walk that fine balance of keeping a more sustainable future while recognizing that there are some things that just simply aren't going to be able to be reversed. We are going to use some heavy machinery no matter what, which is going to compact our ground. We have to use the diesel fuels for it, all of these different pieces. The goal would be to simply try to use it the least amount possible. And another area that I really feel quite strongly about when I research all these things, a lot of, with the administration change, and this is really not a political place. We support anyone in their life, how they're going, and don't care how one votes at the voting booth, right? The truth is, when administrations shift from one political viewpoint to another, there's a lot of upheaval and transition, and we're seeing that. So there are a lot of articles that are coming out that have a tone that fits the current administration more. And so for those who are very strongly to the most liberal extreme environmentalists, they're going to naysay those arguments. I'm going to balance that on the same time and say that all sciences, I don't care whether it's earth sciences, environmental sciences, medical sciences, all sciences right now are constrained very heavily by the current view of whatever their particular science holds across a multitude of ideas within that science. And I'm not going to take a stance on one side or the other. What I'm going to say is that when science is not allowed to be objective and to test their hypotheses in an open-minded environment, allowing the results to be what the results are, not with a preconceived idea of what the results should be, none of us really know what true science would say right now. And so we have to be a little bit aware of the fact that no matter which side of the argument we're being educated by, being informed by, that we believe in, there is a heavy level of agenda. And so that's one of the things within Collectively Rewilding that we don't want to focus on. We want to focus on providing different points of view from any type of perspective where someone is working towards a more sustainable, a more harmonious approach with nature, right? And I think that that is the same kind of thing when we're talking about a balance between old technologies and new technologies. And one of the problems with a rose-colored view of environmentalism, and that's why I quote it like this, because there are so many different viewpoints of what environmentalism means. Sustainability, on the other hand, is a quantifiable objective if it is used in such a fashion. How sustainable is the method of tree removal for any given piece of land? For the drain off of the soil? Is the loss of soil on any given piece of land sustainable? These are quantifiable objectives or perspectives, all right? And so when we approach purely from a very hardcore environmental, as it's viewed politically, stance, we may do damage in trying to move forward. And one of the things that I read in the articles that were being allowed to have a little bit of a different voice in our very heavily controlled media was that in an effort to show a different way, environmental projects were going out and taking land from nature that had not been disturbed by human activity, or at least not as heavily disturbed by human activity, such as this open land here to the west of me. It hasn't been developed. It's never been deliberately dug into to create road structure or any of these types of things. It is undeveloped and has never been developed land. And as many of these environmental pursuits are going out, instead of going to some place that has been abandoned, neglected, things falling apart, and reclaiming that and turning it into a more sustainable venture, they're going into undeveloped or uncharted lands as far as human deliberate activity. There's been activity out here in this open land. There are ATVs on it all the time. People take their full cars out there. There's people walking all the time. They had a landing strip for drones and things of that nature out there for a while. I think that there might be an off-roading kind of a track or a dirt bike kind of a track that people have just kind of worked into, maybe done a little bit of work, used features until they became more like that. Not a deliberate effort, right? Not a carved out, concreted dirt bike area. It's just been used as such. And so it is left undeveloped, if not undisturbed. These are the considerations that we have to make when we're moving forward. So many of us that have a goal set of trying to start a community, we talk about this all the time in both of the communities that I host for. It comes up. We want to start communities that are more sustainable, that work more as a community, all of these different pieces. One of the things to consider is claiming area that has been abandoned or neglected instead of going out and taking an undeveloped 30 acres from something that could stay more natural, that at least hasn't had the soil compacted by years of semi trucks running over it and things to that nature. Instead, just ATVs and some vehicle usage, some human activity at a recreational level, right? Just something to think about. So, any questions on any of the different material that I talked about? When we're just doing the dirt work, I don't really get to tell you guys, oh, we did this and we did that. What did you do? I would love to hear what you did. We moved dirt. No questions? Yes, Rowana, please. We have a small audience. Just go ahead and unmute yourselves, folks, if you have a question or a thought.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, like you were talking about how the area around you, some of it has been getting repurposed for other things, getting developed and all that stuff. Have you noticed as you've been digging up your soil and replanting and moving things around, have you noticed at all any new species of bugs or any changes in just just new, like any change in any critters that have been showing up lately, or as you've seen so far it's been relatively the same even with just the change in season? Not that I guess
it's a little hard for me to judge, right? We just moved onto this property on September 1st of last year, so we haven't quite reached a full year. I do believe that there's been some positive and negative. And to answer a very specific question, yes, there's a species of wasp that is a hybrid wasp. Two wasps out in nature interbred and created a new species of wasp, a hybrid wasp. And they're very, very prevalent in our backyard. And it's nice. They're non-aggressive. They're not doing any harm to anyone. When my husband mows over it, they don't even care about that, even though they're a ground nesting wasp. I do think that we're bringing in some dragonflies. That's one of the first elements that we noticed at the last property where we brought soil in, as the bug life shifted from the little but negative bug life that was there to a more balanced overall. Yes, we were still dealing with a little bit larger population of things like box elder bugs than you would in a fully balanced system, but they were not an infestation any longer as they had been. And we were seeing the praying mantises and the ladybugs and the dragonflies. I do believe that we've already started seeing some dragonfly activity from what we've done here. I am also sad to report that because we were unknowingly for generations doing harm to hummingbirds by putting out these hummingbird feeders and not washing them every day, especially think about it as the heat increases. Maybe 50, 60 years ago, it was a different situation for a lot of the country, but it gets so hot that that sugar crystallizes and ferments and gets molds and bacterias and things like that in it. And the folks at this property, they had 2 hummingbird feeders up. And I've seen the hummingbirds just circling the property looking for some sort of food. I had hoped that they would appreciate the ditch lilies. They're more orangey, but they're towards that red hued trumpet style flower that hummingbirds like, and they didn't touch on them at all. I've been thinking I might try to put out a geranium. I believe that they like geraniums. They're not super. There we go. That's a nice question. Okay, I thought so. Yay. Okay, so I'm going to find some geraniums and put them out on the front porch so that they'll have some sort of food source here to replace the 2 feeders, one in the backyard and one in the front yard. At least they'll have something. I just see them now. They don't really circle the property here, but they go up in the air, probably close to 40 or more feet, and they just hover there. And you can see them kind of like circling around, and I think they're just looking for food. So I think they really actually depended on this property for some sustenance. And so I'm going to try to get some back too.
Okay, that's a really good point. I never thought about it like that, but that's a good point to bring up, at least to remind other people as well, for the hummingbirds. My other
I
question.
just learned myself like in the last year or so, and
Yeah,
I was really saddened to know that it's so much easier when you can just put it like bird seed in a bird feeder and walk away from it for a week or
yeah,
two, right? So please,
that's
did you
true.
had another question?
Yes, the next question was about the wood chips.
Mhm.
So, just doing my own research about like wood chips and stuff. Some wood chips, of course, some people don't really pay attention. They just chop the wood and shave it down and disperse it to whoever. But depending on the trees, some trees have termites in them or different critters in them as well. So my
Mhm.
next
We
question
did not
was,
have any problem with the wood chips that we got. We did
okay,
specify that we didn't want any black walnut, eucalyptus.
uh-huh.
Um, I can't remember if we asked for no juniper or not. We got juniper. We did get a lot of rose bushes that had been added to the wood chip. And it's been a little bit miserable letting those work their way down. It takes a long time for rose thorns to biodegrade. So definitely, folks, what Rowana is talking about is something to keep in mind if you do the getchipdrop.com. They do have something where you can request, not this type of tree or whatever. And thank you, Rowana. I will definitely put no termite infested trees, please. Once they've chopped them down and let them sit for a while, I don't know, would they survive a wood chipping process? Probably so, a few of them enough to get it started again, huh?
Yeah, if they at least if they lay eggs in there, the eggs will stay or the larvae will stay inside the chip with as long as it's not like doesn't cut right through it, but it'll survive
Yeah.
long enough until the next place you put it, and then I guess, I was thinking about it because I was like, once you put it in and then it's in the soil with the plants, but I was just wondering, I'm glad you said you requested specifically no wood chips with any termites or anything else
So
in.
I'm going to do that going forward. Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, it came up for us because we were going to take our neighbor, they had a friend that was cutting down a log and they needed my friend's trailer for it. And they found termites in the tree. So they didn't
Oh
bring it
wow.
over. And, I'm really grateful for that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, rose thorns also, just as a side note with that, rose thorns decompose much slower than other organic matter and can take several years to fully break down. So it's not so much that we're waiting for them to break down for the soil to be more pleasant. It's working its way into the overall wood chip cover and soil, and less are we having problems with them coming into our shoes or getting into the dog's paws. I haven't seen the cat be too bothered by it. So I don't know if he just has a little bit more sensitivity to where he doesn't quite put his foot down when he finds the thorns. But yeah, it's gotten all the rest of us. So
Thank
termites, rose bushes, laurel, black walnut, definitely things. Eucalyptus. Eucalyptus is not a good tree to have in your wood chip. So all of those things are really important. I do have a meme that I can share with you all. I think it probably needs to get updated. Let me find it before I go searching through gosh knows what when I'm into all of these pieces. And it talks about, all of the different types of plants and things that you would not want in your compost. Hopefully it's just right here in my memes. If not, I'll search for it as I know I've shared it for you guys. Let's just try searching it. Darn, it's not going to find it. Let's just see about compost in general. I know exactly what it looks like. I'll make sure to find it for you guys. There we go. Okay. So this is a nice little visual aid. Black walnut, eucalyptus, juniper, laurel. These have natural actual herbicides inside them. Just like when you do companion planting and you bring in marigolds, those plants put off pest deterrents. Well, the types that are in these trees are more pervasive and they can deter positive plants as well as negative pests and things. Your beech, holly, oak, and sweet chestnut have really high lignin, which is another nasty kind of deterrent chemical that plants put off, and low nitrogen. So they're not going to add a lot of nitrogen to your soil when you utilize their bark. Here it says thorns can take years to decompose, not recommended, right? So these are all really great things to avoid in your compost. And I'll just bump this up until I can find it in my storage of all of our materials. But that was a really good point, Rowana. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you for sharing that as well. Benny had a couple of questions in the comments.
Thank you. Check those out. All right. Benny asks, which native plants are best for attracting bees, butterflies, birds, and helpful bugs? There's a little bit of debate about that. I've seen some warnings against some of the more common recommendations. So that is one of the, let's see, do I not have it up anymore here? Thought I did. Let me pull that up here. And that is, there we go, topic-based planting. In the topic-based planting, I believe that I had pollinator friendly. No, I didn't. Okay, so I will add that, Benny. I'm going to add a section for pollinator friendly because like butterfly bush, I've heard positive and negative about it. So I want to do an overview before putting out a ton. Really, if you put flowers out, that's going to help pollinators, giving a variety, the little mixes that they have, being aware that many of those mixes do contain some invasive species such as morning glory, which is bindweed at a point, right? Like it can be a much bigger, prettier plant than what your common bindweed is, but it's still the same difference. So I will definitely get a pollinator friendly list of the commonly recommended plants so that we can look at whether they're really actually positive even for the pollinators. Like I've read butterfly bush is not really the best, perhaps, plant to put out, though it's commonly recommended. All right. I think I had some articles pulled up that I was going to use for it, and that's why I thought I had it, but I had to do a purge, and I closed down all of my tabs in both Google Chrome and in Microsoft Edge and just went and started over fresh. So I think I lost all of those. I will definitely get some of that out for you. Let's check out Benny's other questions. I would love to give you more definitive answers. However, there are just two commonly recommended invasive species. I really want to do the research before I throw out the commonly recommended plants and things. Clover, the only invasive species of clover for North America is the sweet yellow clover. So if you use clover, pollinators love clover. That's one that I can easily and happily recommend. Scarlet, red, white clover, great, great plants. That's definitely, Benny asked what kind of human wildlife balance is healthy and safe in our community. It depends on the community. So in Durango, Colorado, they have to have bear resistant garbage cans and things like that. And it isn't a choice, it is what it is. If you don't try to eradicate species as they used to do, you have to find a way to stay safe in an area that may have a wildlife population. As we discussed in, I think, Garden Q&A last week, I thought it was 112. The number had gone up substantially. Over 200 people are killed every year by deer in North America. Not a good statistic. So it's something to be aware of. And when you're in an area such as the one that we're in right here, where we've already experienced coyotes and deer, my husband was going to work the other day and he leaves very early, around 5:30 in the morning. He walked out the front door and there's like this little nook over here. It's just barely past the house where the fence is, and there's some rows of Sharon and some aspen, and they've just created this cute little nook over here on the side of the house. And as my husband came out of the house, a deer startled and ran out of that little nook, and it was, 5 to 10 feet away from him. If he would have done something stupid, or really for some reason that deer was being aggressive, it could have been really negative, right? So you've got to be aware. I really watch for the coyotes when I'm out, because we let our dogs and our cat go out the front door. The dogs stay on the property. The cat does not. And when it's night, I try to only let the cat out in the backyard. And I watch for the area where the coyotes are the most likely to come from. I thought it was just a dog when I started to chase it off, but it was a coyote. And I wasn't scared. I'd seen already that there were only 2 of them. And my dogs were out there, and I made myself really big and just said, "Go home." And it turned around, and it wasn't scared, but it didn't approach us anymore. It was trying to catch the stray cats that live in this area. And so it would have not caught the cat, though, and it would have ran into our property where the 2 dogs and I were. And so it's something to be aware of, definitely. I believe that we should be aware of wild animals, and we should learn to be cautious and safe, because I don't want to see the large animals disappear, right? Like we've talked about here, where the megafauna is slowly disappearing across the globe, megafauna being by definition 150 pounds or more. So some humanity is also considered megafauna. I would not be. I'm a little bit small. I've kind of a medium-sized person with a smaller frame inside of that. So I don't get a count as megafauna, but many of the humans on this planet get a count as megafauna. And we're replacing all of the other megafauna. And I think that that's sad. So I don't believe that we should try to eradicate them. And I think we should work wherever we can, like we've discussed here with the bridges for wildlife, or the tunnels underneath roads and things like that, to do everything that we can to enable that wildlife to stay where it's at. And that does include things like, we don't talk about it, hasn't come up, and I don't really see it in discussions much or articles, but snakes, spiders, they are a necessary part of the food chain. And when we seek only to eradicate them, it's detrimental for us as well. So it may turn out to be just fine and new species will fill the niche and we'll never feel it. That's one side of that kind of environmental political thought process, right? I do believe that, especially when you consider the bug life, it is absolutely as or more essential than the life of the species of humanity, right? If the bugs all die, I think that we all die too. And so in the end, trying to create a sustainable future, whatever anyone's given perspective on that is keeping life alive for humanity's existence as well. It is a very selfish, not always altruistic thought process. And most of us come from that altruistic side of the thought process, but when it really boils down to it, if we kill off necessary life too far, what does that mean for us as a species and all of the life that's on this planet? There have been mass extinctions before. This current paradigm that we exist in now wouldn't have existed if there hadn't been cataclysmic biological shifts in Earth's past, right? So it's all a grand adventure. It's not a destination, it's definitely a journey. And I think that we all have to make those kinds of internal decisions on what we think the balance should be. That's really what the answer is, Benny. I think it really comes down to what each individual and what each community determines as they deal with the wildlife that is or isn't really prevalent in their area. There are so many ways to support pollinators without creating pest problems or using chemicals, with the caveat that when you are bringing the life back, as we are right now, we've talked about this, I think, last week, but one of the stages of bringing the life, both of the soil and the bug life on any property that I've dealt with, the first season or two, you actually added in some additional less desirable bugs, but that's only our mentality. Spiders are absolutely necessary. Wasps and hornets and yellow jackets and all of these things are a part of the pollinating process. And hint, hint, they eat the spiders. The spiders eat the other undesirable bugs. It's all a part of it. We don't want just one set of any given bug, good or bad. Infestation is infestation. A balance is really what you're looking for. And when you're working from a property that isn't healthy towards a more healthy ecosystem for that patch of land, if you don't introduce chemicals, you will deal with a period where you are bringing in more visible. Again, a spider is absolutely a part of a desired bug life on any given property. I just cannot tell you, though, how much spider life I see when the process begins. As it balances out, the spider life goes down, the box elder bug populations, this is something really common in the Four Corners area, those box elder style beetles, as the spiders come in, they start working on that excessive box elder bug beetle type population. And then you have other things that come in, the wasps and hornets, and they start balancing out those spiders. And then you have the dragonflies and things that, as well as the gnats and the spiders, come in to eat your, not gnats and spiders, as well as your hornets and things and spiders, right? They're all eating the gnats. Then you have the bird life come in and start participating more. The birds are always there, but you can see where birds go on any given property in a neighborhood and where they don't. And so it's all a part of the process. If you don't want to do the immediate manicured thing and bring in a lot of resources from another place and use all these types of chemical interventions, it's not an overnight process. It takes a minute, and you're going to see more of those spiders, which really are actually a part of the beneficial cycle of bug life, really show up heavily to get rid of, along with like your praying mantises, those came in before the ladybugs, right? And I don't know about anybody else, but praying mantises are so cool, but they're so creepy. Oh my gosh, if one lands on me, oh, I don't do anything, but inside my mind, I'm like losing my mind. I'm like, get it off of me. And so I'm like, shaking it. I'm not going to hurt it, but whew, grasshoppers and praying mantises, dude, they're my bug kryptonite. I don't know why. They just creep me out. I don't care. I foster an environment to bring in things that will kind of creep me out for a while. Too many spiders and lots of praying mantises. And then when that balances out, when you really start seeing the wasp populations, which where I'm really lucky on this property, it's not as beneficial in the weed population, but the bug population, I have seen a lot less of the huge spiders that we saw in the Magna property. I have seen a couple now of like wolf spiders or maybe something along that basic kind of garden looking spiders that are pretty hefty, approaching a 50-cent piece size, but that's a lot better than the quarter size black widows that were on the last property. I've definitely started seeing some praying mantises, very few, but a few ladybugs. I may introduce, when we actually get to start gardening, some praying mantises or ladybugs, but I just think it really almost inhumane or unethical the way that they store those little critters, and the ones that don't get purchased are most likely just going to die in their little plastic case. And I just don't really want to promote that. So I prefer, again, to foster that life with the plants and the soil work and the water retention, right? Because the bugs themselves are able to get water better off of your property if your soil is retaining moisture more adequately. So it's just, again, it's all a choice, right? You have to decide if you're willing to deal with that season or two of the weeding out of the negative bugs, or if you want to do it in that more manicured, rapid fashion, changing the soil, bringing in the ladybugs and the praying mantises in the little store-bought containers. Totally. You have a lot of coyotes too, Benny? Yeah, they're pretty well countrywide. I don't think they have anything like that in Hawaii, of course. I imagine they have coyotes in Alaska and all through Canada. Yeah, definitely down through probably South America as well, though I'm not sure. Certainly in Mexico, they have coyotes. So wonderful, Benny. I'm so glad. It is a process. And if you aren't going to take the easy route, the expensive but easy route, it's going to take some time, and you're going to have to deal with some unpleasant elements like unpleasant weeds and unpleasant bugs. Understand that all of it has its place. Like we've talked about, the weeds, whether they're a little bit nicer like the knotweed or a little bit less pleasant like the bindweed, because both of them have that kind of vining aspect. Knotweed spelled K-N-O-T, like to tie a knot, and bindweed being that really common curd side flower that we all see as children, just a little white with the pink veins that smell so nice and vine around everything. Bindweed, they are healing damaged soil. It doesn't matter if it's a natural occurrence and there was a rock slide where there's damaged soil, or if it's human caused damaged soil. The things that we consider weeds, whether it's an invasive species or a native species that we just don't really like, they have a place in nature. So do spiders, so do gnats, so do hornets. And spiders and gnats, spiders and hornets, I cannot get those words correct. Spiders and hornets, their place in the bug chain is to eat the gnats. But if you get rid of the gnats, then the spiders and the hornets don't have anything to eat. And I've really noticed that one of the plants that hornets, wasps, things of that nature really tends to strongly be the pollinators for are sunflowers. So if you're like me and you love sunflowers and you're really not wanting to let that wasp's nest on the underside of your garden shed, as an example, I have one in the inner frame of my garden door, my garden shed door, and I'm not going to keep it there forever, but they already have built it. By the time I saw it, it was already well formed, and I'm going to allow the babies that they're placing in their little structure to come through next spring, and then I'm going to knock it down. I don't want to just constantly have them there. I'm not going to allow the one that's up on our eaves on our house where they could get into the siding and turn the whole wall of our house into a wasp nest. But where it's not going to do any harm in the garden shed, it's a single layer building, no insulation or siding, and I can see it. It's not this wall of a species, which again, when you don't have a comparable, like if this were all grassland or desert or forest or whatever it is for each of our climates, there would be places where there might be something that would be comparable to a wasp wall. But the other bug life would also be as plentiful, and it wouldn't look like the infestation it would be with the cycle of bugs that we generally have on our properties today. That becomes an infestation. And I also have to be aware of my investment into my home. And while I want to respect nature and I want to make room for other species, whether I think humans should take up as much part of the planet as they do or not, I have to take care of my own personal investment and my own safety. If a black widow is in the house, I'm probably not going to try to catch it with a cup and a paper. I'm probably going to squish it, right? So, and again, those are all the different levels that we have to take. I wouldn't be okay with a wasp nest in the house. My friend Heidi helped the wasp by providing it fluids and sugar water when it was really hot and the wasps were struggling. So, you know, it's something we all have to decide what our levels, what our boundaries are. And so, yes, it really is a process, Benny. It is, no matter what we decide. Even if we take that easy, expensive route, it's still a heck of a process to change an entire property's ecology, right? Because I really like to look at it like that. We talk about the fact that no matter what perspective we have, we're only able to change what we can physically touch. And sometimes not even that, you know, within our own properties, if we're renting, we have to get permission. If we own, we still have to follow the rules. We can't put a 4-tier raised bed in the front yard, right? We have to exist in the structures that we are in. And I lost my train of thought there a little bit, but whether we go the expensive, easy route or we take the slower, more nature-oriented route, because it isn't natural, right? I brought wood chips in. We're creating soil structures that didn't just occur in a natural process. However, whether we take a more natural or a more, how shall I put it, a more manicured or so-called traditional, right? We think of how we do things today many ways, whether it's medicine or agriculture, and we call that traditional. The word traditional means a tradition that has been carried on through a significant portion of time. So traditional agricultural and traditional medicine would really be the kinds of agriculture and medicine that existed 200 years and back, right? But we all have to decide what process we want to take part in, because we're all changing nature. To exist as a human today is to modify parts of nature by your very existence. So we all have to make those decisions. And therein lies the struggle, because we don't always know what's right. Many of us are aware of how cherry-picked our scientific news is, and we don't know always if the decisions that we make based on the literature that's out there is really the best decision. And so we have to make judgment calls, and we also have to live by our own experience. Just as the best example, I have very poor success rates with container gardening. So when I say that the Mel's Mix, CR's Mix garden soil trial for me said that mixes weren't the way to go, that doesn't mean that if Benny ran the exact same trial, or Vanessa, or my mother, Anita, only 6 hours away in a very comparable climate, my mother can keep things alive in the same pot without repotting them for years. And I can't. It's just, each of us will have a different experience. It is not it's not a pure science. It is subjective. We will not always produce the results, even if we are able to produce the same test or study. It is something that, like when they say a person is a people person or not, having a green thumb in different methods of growing. Some people just have a green thumb. They can do it. It doesn't matter. They just learned about it. They're out there growing it. Any kind of any kind of gardening venture they can handle. Some people are going to be very successful with container gardening and struggle with in-ground, or as in my case, the reverse of that. Never think that you can't be successful in nature, in the garden, however you're going out there and touching real soil and plants and trees and the sun and the sky and the water. Know that your experience is your own, and no one else should tell you what works or doesn't work for you, what is or isn't right for you. That is one thing that we really experience in that sustainable environmental viewpoint. It is very ideology specific. What a person believes, many times they think that everybody else is wrong. And so I think that if we can open that up a little bit more and understand that not only do we not always know the outcomes of certain things, as we've talked about here in class, like when they replanted a forest with only 4 types of trees, totally destroying the balance, because while those were the most prominent trees in the forest, there were really at least 20 or 30 identified species of tree in that forest. We have to be understanding of ourselves and of others. We don't have a manual to fix what's broken, and to be completely frank about it, we don't always agree about what's broken. So I think being as open-minded and as willing to allow others as possible their perspectives, whether they agree with us or disagree with us, is our best foot forward, is our best method forward. We never know when a thought process that we have could be completely wrong-headed. Just like we've talked about, when I picture in my head creating a community, I always do picture going into a more natural area, just because I love being out in it, and I'd never really torn it apart in my thoughts until I started reading these articles. Understanding always that I was never probably going to be able to afford something that was towards one of those natural areas. I probably would never have been able to afford to damage nature in that fashion. However, I didn't consider it. So that's just always a possibility that's out there, that no matter how strongly we hold a belief or someone else holds a belief about an idea within a more sustainable future, there's room for error, and there's also room for a different experience. If everybody says you're not going to be able to have any in-ground growing, you're only allowed to do container growing, I would just freak out, right? So we don't want to place limits on other people's process if possible, because we never know when we're going to find out a piece of information that totally changes our own perspective. Let me just check and make sure. Thank you, Rowana. Thank you, Benny, for all of your questions. You can't have as wonderful a discussion without multiple contributors. So I really appreciate you guys participating to this with the discussion. All right, guys, it is time to wrap up tonight. Let's go and check out our calendar really quickly. We will all be back together on Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Mountain, 9:30 p.m. Central, and 10:30 p.m. Eastern. Hope to see you all there, and I hope you all have a fantastic week. Please feel free to unmute yourselves and say goodnight, everyone.
Good night,
Everyone
everybody.
have a good evening.
Good night.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you so much. Thank you.
Thank you all. So much fun. Enjoy your week. Bye, guys.